کنفرانس در ایالت آریزونای آمریکا. سخنرانی شخصیتهای برجسته آمریکایی و منتخبان ایالت آریزونا. فنیکس، 13 فوریه 2015. خطر بنیادگرایی و تروریسم تحت نام اسلام و تهدید دستیابی رژیم ایران به سلاح اتمی. ضرورت حمایت از مجاهدین خلق ایران، آنتیتز بنیادگرایی و دعاوی قرون وسطایی رژیم آخوندی حاکم بر ایران. پیام سناتور جان مکین: ضرورت حمایت از حقوق مردم ایران و یک سیاست قاطع در قبال رژیم آخوندی. شهردار رودی جولیانی. ژنرال هیو شلتون، رئیس پیشین ستاد مشترک نیروهای مسلح آمریکا. لیندا چاوز، مدیر پیشین روابط عمومی کاخ سفید. پال گوسار، نماینده کنگره آمریکا از ایالت آریزونا. مارک برنوویچ، وزیر دادگستری ایالت آریزونا. رابرت گراهام، رئیس حزب جمهوری خواهان ایالت آریزونا. سناتور آدام دریگز، رئیس کمیته قضایی سنای ایالت آریزونا. جیم بارینگ، معاون شهردار فنیکس، ایالت آریزونا. دیوید لیوینگستون، ناظم مجلس ایالتی آریزونا. ریک گری، رئیس کمیته حمل و نقل و زیرساخت‌ها در مجلس ایالتی آریزونا.
I'm sure glad that Senator McCain stepped in behind Mayor Giuliani. But what I'm going to talk about today is an action plan. When you take a look at time, the ebbs of sand move, and you can't recapture those. And we saw one of those moments this week with losing one of our own in Prescott, Arizona, Caleb Mueller. And one of the things that I want to highlight is in front of the Senate Armed Services and Foreign Affairs, a number of our foreign dignitaries from the past gathered to talk about this problem. And that same problem is this president. He feigns to talk about what is here, what is knocking on our door. Every which way, workplace violence, random acts of violence. It's got to stop. But it's got to meet a crescendo. And I hope that after what you see here, you're going to light a fire under Congress. You need to light a fire under Congress, both the House and Senate, because time is ticking. But I think there's some really poignant terms that we need to hear. There's a great voice of Henry Kissinger, who probably knows more about nuclear arming, disarmament than maybe anybody. And I want to quote him. Nuclear talks with Iran began as an international effort to deny Iran the capability to develop a military nuclear option. They are now essentially a bilateral negotiation over the scope of that capability through an agreement that sets a hypothetical limit of 1 year on an assumed breakout. The impact of this approach will be to move from preventing proliferation to managing it. Let me repeat. The impact of this approach will be to move from preventing proliferation to managing it. How do you do that? Iran has been a consummate poker player with America. Any deal has got to have oversight by Congress. It has to be torn apart. It has to be looked at every single step of the way. And it's got to be able to be either brought down or held up by Congress. That is key. It's time to call Congress. Call the Senate, call the House members. Go out and make an appointment to see them. Make sure that this deal is not a bad deal and that we actually have Congress overseeing it. Let's ramp it up. Sanctions. When you go to play a game, you put sanctions on the table. You don't play from a weak hand, you play from a strong hand. With the price of oil, you have an opportunity. Strategy. The general knows all about strategy. It's an opportunity. We must continue to demand accountability from our leaders. But make no mistake, time is not our friend in this issue. And so we sit at that razor's edge. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you today. I'm so glad that each of you took the time out of your day and schedule to support this great cause. It's great to have this event here in Phoenix. We're discussing troubling events that have occurred in the past and are occurring today, half a world away from us. As we look at the displays here, and I hope after this event that you will come forward and look into the eyes of some of these pictures and see the faces of these men, women, and yes, children that have been killed by an oppressive regime in Iran. Iran is the epicenter of terrorism and Islamic fundamentalism. It predates Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and all Islamic fundamental groups that are currently threatening our national security. Iran's regime is now seeking to develop a nuclear weapon, which would change the whole equation in this region and our global security. Iran is now being led, and has been led for the last year and a half, by Hassan Rouhani, who, if you Google him, you will read many media portrayals that he is a moderate leader. In the year and a half since he has been leading, more than 1,250 Iranian citizens have been killed, many of them publicly. We need to expand our knowledge and our vision so that we could properly engage in not only the problems in Iran and the Middle East, but the solutions. The enemy is Islamic fundamentalism. It is not the people in Iran. I personally have friends in Iran today who want nothing more than freedom. We are here with a group, and this group is being led, and they represent democracy, hope, freedom, a pluralistic government, freedom of religion, freedom of expression, dignity and respect for women, and for freedom for all the people of Iran. We also are greatly concerned for the threat that a nuclear Iran possesses for all of us. We are concerned because the Obama administration has failed to lead in this area. So what can we do? This is not the job for one person, but the large group of people, all of you included, who have gathered today, make a difference. We are educating the world about these issues across Arizona, across the United States, and across the world. This event will be seen across the globe, and people are watching. They will see that there is an organized movement to replace a religious theocracy in Iran with a government that is freely elected, a government that guarantees basic human rights to her people, and I believe a government that would be a catalyst for change in the entire region. I've been privileged to meet many Iranians who have fled their homeland to come to the United States in search of freedom. May we use our freedom to help them find freedom at home. Thank you.
Last year was the first year that we had a conference here. I was invited to come and speak, and I was a little dumbfounded about why they would want me to speak. But I will tell you, especially for those of you that are here for the first time, there's a danger in coming to this because your heart gets grabbed. But the people that I've hung around with that are Iranian Americans, I see the passion for their country. I see the passion for freedom. I see the passion, the same heart that I see in the American people as we're fighting to maintain our freedom. And so for those of you in Iran that are fighting for your freedom, to get it back, I want you to know that from the history of America, I can look back and I see where our founding fathers laid down their lives and sacrificed their fortunes, their families, their lives to purchase the freedom that we've had. I was fortunate, as Ms. Chavez said, to go to the event in Paris. I had talked with many Iranians. I had talked with many of our military. In fact, one of the Iranians had asked me the day after the conference, and he had asked me, what was the speech that really got you the most? And I said, it really wasn't one of the speeches. It was my conversation with the gentleman who was sitting by me, a Colonel Wes Martin, who told me the story that he had been in charge of Camp Liberty when the Americans went in and took their weapons away from them, with the promise that we would protect you. He was the one that got to know those people, got to trust those people. When he told me that he was also the one that was told, you need to withdraw from that camp. And I looked on his face, and years afterwards, you could still see the tortured look. Here was a man of character, a man who stood by his word, a man who also did his duty. And on the one hand, he was committed to these people because of his character, of what's right and wrong. And on the other hand, he had the commands from his commander-in-chief, and he had to follow orders. That, to me, was heartbreaking. We should never put our military, our men, our people of honor in a situation where their honor has to be compromised. We have people in Iran that are suffering right now because they are not compromising their honor. We as Americans, we may not have the same religious faith, but one of the things that we have in unison with them is the love and the commitment to freedom. And so whether we are here in America or whether you are there in Iran or Paris or anywhere else across the globe, never give up. Your Iranian brothers and sisters that are here are setting such a tremendous example of quality, of character, of devotion, of passion. They inspire us. They inspire me to not only work for you, but to be a better American. Never give up. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. It's great to be here. It's interesting when you hear the speeches that we've heard today, you hear of the evil and the darkness that has come by a regime that's ruling with this theocratic dimensions and abuse that put people in repression and oppression. So we had the great opportunity as well to participate last year, and then we had the opportunity to go to Paris. And I want to paint a picture for you because I think the human element is one of these things when we talk about this destruction, the assassination of the people, the pains and the torture that's happening in Camp Liberty and other places in Iran, sometimes we don't make the connection with the people. When we were in Paris and we were being bused to this convention center, to give you a perspective of the size and the magnitude of this event, you walk into this hall, and there's over 132,000 people in this hall. And what do they want? They want freedom. Outside the hall, there were buses and buses and buses and people on the grass laying around. There was probably an equal number of people outside the event. See, we talk about 120,000 people here. We talk about the 1,200 people that have been executed. Those are the people we know about. If you meet our Iranian American friends here and our Arizonans here and you listen to their stories, we had one of our people die that lives in Prescott. They were killed. They were murdered. If you talk to our neighbors here, the Iranian Americans, they'll tell you about cousins and uncles and dads and husbands and children that disappeared or were murdered publicly, were humiliated, were dismembered. And it becomes real because you hear their story. We sat in a round table in Paris the day after the event, and we listened to a woman tell a story about her husband being killed, and she literally carried her children over the mountains as a refugee to become free because she was afraid that her children and she would meet the same fate of her husband. That's not some story we read in the newspaper. When you look in her eyes and you see the hurt and the pain and the tears, it becomes absolutely real. Currently, you have Khomeini. And Ayatollah Khomeini, when he was the leader back in the Iran hostage crisis, he had his pupil, Khomeini, right? They're trouncing on a weak American president and leader that doesn't have any footing to stand and push back. So what do? How do we change that? Well, look around. You heard this notion, this cry for unity today? A unified voice and a movement can topple governments, especially when it has righteous intent behind freedom and the blessing of liberty. So how are you active? What are you doing? Some of you are here for the first time. Read more. Learn. Talk to people that you know that are Iranian Americans. Listen to them. Understand this movement of fundamental Islam and this whole notion of radical Islam and what it's doing. And how can you combat it? We have to stand up and push back in a way that's aggressive, that adopts force and fear because it's a unified movement that's a groundswell that can topple governments. So I encourage you to engage in the process. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. My family, we're engaged in this movement and fight for freedom across this world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. The people in this room today, there are at least twice as many people here this year as there were last year. And I think last year I challenged you that when you went home you had to talk to your neighbors and your friends. And I'm going to challenge you to do that again. And it shouldn't be, don't just talk to people who you think might agree with you. Talk to people and challenge people who may disagree with you. As I say, this is not a partisan issue. It is not because Barack Obama, simply because he is a Democrat, that he's bad on this issue. The fact is, the President of the United States, when it comes to fighting terrorism, when it comes to understanding the threat against us, he's not a serious person. And it is up to you to try to educate your fellow citizens, to demand of your media that they cover the resistance to the mullahs in Iran. There is a moderate Islamic movement in the world, and it is headed up by a woman, Madam Maryam Rajavi, who is President-elect of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. And you've heard about her program today, and many of you know it firsthand because you were part of that movement. This is a movement that believes in all the things that we in America believe, that our founders believed in. Freedom of press, freedom of the ballot box, freedom of religion, a separation between church and state so that you do not have the government telling you what to believe, and how to practice your religion. Equality among all peoples, equality between men and women, equality between majorities and minorities. So I charge you today, particularly those of you who are not of the Iranian American community, to go out and educate the people in your own communities about this resistance movement. You need to become an active political voice. Your voices need to be heard in Washington. They need to be heard in the White House. They need to be heard in the halls of Congress. They need to be heard in your state houses. It is important that all of you speak with one voice and that we all speak with one voice. And there are a number of things that we must demand. First and foremost, as Americans, we have to protect our own national security. And protecting that national security means that we will not be safe here at home so long as we have a powerful, rich country run by fundamentalist, insane people, as the mayor suggested, who brutally oppress their own people, who have public hangings, who cut off arms, who stone women to death, who have vice police going out, and if you don't have your headscarf on exactly the right way and you're a woman, you may get beaten. This is what goes on in Iran, and we have to stand up to that regime, and we have to support those who are opposing it. Iraq right now is an entirely unstable country. You've got a government there that does not represent all the people, in which there is sectarian violence that goes on, a country whose leaders are aligned with Iran. And in the middle of that horrendously dangerous situation, and people who in the past would have been able to defend themselves when these people were in greater numbers in Camp Ashraf, they were perfectly capable of defending themselves if they were attacked. They had weapons at their disposal. And what did they do when the United States invaded Iran? They voluntarily gave up every one of their weapons. They didn't keep so much as a single handgun to protect themselves. And as a result, what has happened is that you've had the Maliki government go in, you've had the Iranians go in, and you've had people slaughtered, literally slaughtered. We've seen the pictures of these people who were shot in the head, shot in the face, their arms tied in plastic handcuffs. They need to be able to protect themselves. But if we're not going to do that, if we're not even going to allow them to use the T-walls that they have that are being lined up there, that were supposed to be, provide them protection from further attacks from the Iraqi government or from the Iranians, if we're not even going to allow them that defense mechanism, at least allow them to defend themselves. Thank you again.